Hi, everyone. Shannon Dougherty here with DEC's Great Lakes Watershed Program. Joanna just asked me to kind of spend a little bit of time giving a high-level review of some of the funding opportunities that are available, both state and federal, that would support both water quality and resiliency projects. And so the way I structured this, kind of building off of the last Erie County Water Quality meeting, where Tom Snow spoke about the Resilient New York program, is I really tried to kind of select funding sources that would be relevant to that program, supporting the types of projects identified within those studies. And, just a quick disclaimer, all of the information that I'm going to be talking about, I'm certainly not the expert on all of the ins and outs of these grants. You're welcome to ask questions as we go through this. And if we don't know the answer, we will certainly find it for you. But I did want to mention that, so the information presented is based on previous year's grant requirements. And so it is, of course, always subject to change on a year-to-year basis. So keep that in mind. And get going here. So just for some quick context, for those of you who weren't able to join us for the last presentation, the Resilient New York studies, I know many of them took place in communities that you represent. There were a good number of studies that took place in the greater Buffalo region, really focusing on flood-prone stream reaches and kind of looking across an entire section of stream, essentially, and identifying practices that are going to help with flood mitigation as well as water quality. And so these are the types of projects that were identified locally. So you can see a lot of them are dealing with kind of restoring the riparian corridor, restoring and reconnecting floodplains, putting things back where they were, kind of all with the aim of trying to slow, absorb, infiltrate excess high flows and floodwaters. Here's just a quick cap of the grant programs I'm going to be breezing through. They're categorized here by, water quality, resilience, flooding, and then some other really not grant programs, but other kinds of support options, let's say. But, they're not programs that can be easily binned. And many of them support projects, that would, cross between these lines, let's say. So, just kind of to get us organized here. So I'm going to start and dig into the water quality improvement program. I guess, maybe take a quick pause and raise your hand, or your virtual hand maybe there, if you've applied and received funding from this grant program in the past. I don't know if I guess I can't really see hands here. I'm guessing a fair number of you are probably familiar. I see Jason's hand. Probably familiar with this grant program. So this has been around for some time. This is through DEC and is one of the programs that is contained within the consolidated funding application. So this is a program, an annual program. It includes multiple grant programs available through New York State. It's a kind of centralized point of, applying for the grants. And I think the other thing that makes it unique is that 20% of the evaluation scores for each of the grant is actually provided by the regional economic development councils. So projects that are more in line with their regional strategies are going to score higher. The rest of the, evaluation is based on kind of the technical criteria contained within each of the grant programs. And so WQIP does fund, 75% of the project, relies on 25% local match. There is a diversity of different eligible activities that are included. The activities highlighted in bold are really the ones that I'm going to kind of be focusing in on today, only because they pertain more so to the Resilient New York types of projects. So nature-based flood mitigation and the like. There we go. So within the non-agricultural non-point source category of WQIP, these are all the different kinds of projects that you can find within this grant program. And if you're interested in any of these, obviously highly recommend looking at the overview or the RFP essentially from last year's grant program. That's going to have all of the detailed information on the types of projects that are eligible, how they're evaluated, so you can really kind of understand whether your project need is going to score, favorably or not. The categories in bold here, of course, are the types of practices that would support Resilient New York implementation. And I think, a lot of these are self-explanatory. I won't get into the nuts and bolts. I know many of you are familiar with many of these types of projects. I do just want to have two notes though. So within WQIP, for stream culvert repair and replacement, there's this category, and then there's also an aquatic restoration category. And both of those actually support the same types of projects. So culvert right sizing, addressing constrictions in the system, in a stream system caused by infrastructure. But one is kind of evaluated according to water quality criteria, or, is it contributing to erosion? And if so, it would be under this non-ag non-point source category. And then the aquatic habitat connectivity category, it uses the NAC assessment. So that's what Mark had mentioned earlier. And then based on kind of the barrier severity and other factors like number of stream miles opened up for fish, so if it's more of a habitat project, it would go through that subcategory within the larger WQIP grant. And then lastly, I just want to mention that there's this non-point source programs category. And so this basically is for projects where you're implementing one type of practice, say stream bank stabilization, within a given geographic area, but you have multiple projects within that area. And so then you can kind of batch it as a program and apply within that category. So it's all the way you slice and dice. And I just, every year when projects are awarded, DEC and the other agencies publish a matrix, a summary of the projects that were awarded. And it's helpful sometimes, I think, to kind of just get ideas flowing and to see what other counties and communities are doing. And so this is really just copy and pasted from one of those summary sheets from last year's awards. And so you can see like Portland County here, they likely went after one of those non-point source program grants because they're working in 5 different areas doing stream bank restoration and stabilization. Natural stream bank restoration projects in another community, 2 communities working together on to mitigate erosion and flooding issues. And then there's, stream culvert replacement projects are pretty typical as well. And then, so this is excuse the long name. The grant program is better than the name of this grant. This is a non-point source planning grant, essentially. And so you can almost think of it as a planning support grant for WQIP and other state and federal funding sources. So it really is focused on supporting planning up to $30,000 for project planning reports, or $75,000 to do a comprehensive stream corridor study, akin to like the Resilient New York studies that are available on the website. So if you have a reach of stream that's subject to erosion, water quality issues, flooding, and you want to look across that entire stream reach and identify good projects that are going to help address those issues, this might be a good grant for you to pursue. A lot of the categories you'll see mirror what is available in WQIP, because essentially this was set up to be planning support for WQIP to ensure that we get better applications for that grant, that all of the various factors have been fully considered through a comprehensive planning effort. And with that, I would say, in regards to the conversation, at the beginning of the meeting, NAC studies or, culvert assessment work, is an eligible activity under this planning grant. So I don't know where Newstead got their funding from, but it could have potentially been from this grant. And then here's just some project examples. These are things that counties, communities, I guess counties in this case on this sheet here, have received funding for. So again, doing a stream corridor management plan and engineering design report for a single stream bank stabilization project, looking across a sub-watershed, doing assessments of road and stream culvert crossings, again, using the North American Aquatic Connectivity Collaboration Framework, or NAC. And then, Oneida County is doing some modeling and completing an engineering design for 5 locations in the Socoit Creek watershed. And, I know Tom had mentioned this at the last meeting, and this particular watershed is one of the very few first locations that had a Resilient New York flood mitigation study done. And they really created a pretty robust partnership there to implement the recommended projects. And so I've seen their names show up in quite a few of these grant awards. The Green Innovation Grant Program, this is through the New York State Environmental Facilities Corporation. It is also part of the CFA. Depending on, median household income criteria or whether your project benefits an environmental justice area, your match may be 10% or it may be 25%. There's 3 major categories that are supported. I think green infrastructure, again, is one of them. You're going to see a lot of repeat terminology here. It's a lot of the same types of projects, really, using nature-based solutions to address water quality, flooding issues, while improving habitat and, providing those overall community benefits. And so you can see, again, a lot of the eligible practices listed here, some familiar sites. I think actually this may have been a former field trip site, the green infrastructure that Williamsville has conducted in the last few years. Again, I'm going through this a little quickly. So if anyone has questions, please just chime in, or Joanna, if you want to stop me and let me know if I can help answer anything. In terms of project examples, so EFC does tend to fund the same kinds of green infrastructure projects as the other programs I've already mentioned, although at a larger scale. So you can see that the grant awards here are significantly larger, in the $1 million range. But again, kind of looking at a combination of practices: bioretention, stormwater street trees, porous pavement, restoring whole floodplains. So, I know that there was a lot of floodplain bench projects identified in some of the flood mitigation studies. That kind of work may be a good fit for this grant program. And then there's a nice before and after, where you can see in the picture up above that, it's almost a kind of a naturally channelized stream channel, or it looks like, material was pushed up to kind of berm it and prevent flooding. But, a more sustainable long-term solution is reconnecting that stream with its floodplain and giving it room to spread out and slow down. Climate Smart Communities, another grant program available through DEC. This one tends to be, maybe deemed a little less desirable by some, because it does require that 50% local match. But it does open you up to kind of a larger diversity, a broader array of resilience work. And you can see a lot of that listed here on the right-hand side portion of the slide. So not only nature-based flood resiliency and green infrastructure types of projects, but also relocating, retrofitting infrastructure to reduce flood risk, emergency preparedness and response system related efforts, activities that would ultimately support a community becoming eligible or enrolled in FEMA's community rating system. So, it's a slightly more, gives you a little bit more flexibility. And I'll note too that on each of the slides, I've included a link icon there in the upper right-hand corner. And so I'm just linking to the pages with all of this detailed information, and I'll be sharing this as a PDF after the presentation, so you can kind of go through at your own speed. Bridge New York, there's been, I think, 2 rounds of this grant program since it was first implemented several years ago. This is through the Department of Transportation. As you can see, it's fairly larger grants, only 5% match required for bridges, no cost for culvert projects, really with the sole purpose of rehabilitating and replacing bridges and culverts. And, projects are prioritized generally according to these factors listed. So anything that would be in, poor structural condition, that would ultimately help mitigate weight restrictions or detours, facilitate, economic development, local competitiveness, and then improve resiliency and reduce flooding. And I'll just add real quick that I think, the Federal Infrastructure Act funding, this is one of the programs that we anticipate will receive a good chunk of that money. So don't know anything definitively at this point, but this will be one that we keep an eye on as that money rolls out. Another program, Clean Water State Revolving Fund. This is not a grant program. This is a loan program. This is again through the Environmental Facilities Corporation. So it provides interest-free or low-interest financing to projects, eligible project types listed here on the right-hand side of the screen again. And, I think most of the time we hear about this funding source or financing source, and we think wastewater treatment projects. I think in New York State, that's probably, the rule rather than the exception. But it does also fund stormwater and non-point source projects. The key to this particular funding source is ensuring that your project is included on the intended use plan. So there's a whole process. You can, go to the website, you can input your project information and kind of apply for your project to be included on this plan, and it will be scored according to the criteria that they have. But it needs to be on that plan if it's going to be eligible for this financing.
Shannon, quick question.
Yeah.
For that plan, what's the timing? So if you were to submit a project now, is it likely that it might get on a plan for next year?
So the deadline is actually March 1st for that year's plan. So for the 2023 plan, I think I read that the deadline, I have it in my notes, which I can't see, but I think the deadline was in June. I want to say it was June 17th. So you would need to submit your project by June to have it be included on the 2023 priority project list within, under the intended use plan.
Okay, thanks.
And they do accept projects, year round on a rolling basis. So it does give you that flexibility. And, as part of the process, you have to identify what the repayment source is. And it doesn't have to be related to the project. So, there are examples of things like, you can use stormwater utility fees. You can use, obviously, local taxes, probably not ideal. Trying to think of other examples like recreational user fees. There's a whole list of things that could be helpful to you in paying back these loans. But again, a lot of similar types of projects that I've already spoken about, you can see them, really listed here. But this would be for, obviously, I think for more, large scale kind of immediate need type projects. Wanted to do a quick mention of the Army Corps' Continuing Authorities Program. So these are, as the name suggests, continuing authorities. These are, support that the Corps can provide to communities that does not require additional project-specific congressional authorization. You can see it covers everything from, looking at beach erosion issues to stream bank, shoreline erosion protection, navigation improvements, flood control, ecosystem restoration. I mean, it's covers just about anything you might need. But there is a process, right? So the Corps has their feasibility and implementation process, and I believe they cover feasibility studies up until $100,000, and after that it's a 50-50 cost share. And then, you know, there are match requirements, local match requirements, if you do decide to enter into a project partnership agreement with the Corps. And here's just another example slide, so you can get a sense locally in Ohio, I guess, here too, where, you know, some of these authorities have been used to, you know, further planning and implementation of projects. So, you know, again, everything from shoreline erosion here, addressing slope failure along a stream bank, looking at, you know, habitat restoration alternatives for streams. And last but not least, and not going into great detail on any of this, and I know some of you are probably familiar with some of these programs, but FEMA does offer a few different programs. A flood mitigation assistance grant, which is really focused on assisting, you know, insured properties with, you know, measures to mitigate future flooding, taking that proactive approach to reducing future risk. There's a newer program, or kind of, I guess, re-envisioned program, formerly the Pre-Disaster Mitigation Program, BRIC, Building Resilient Infrastructure in Communities, which is really focused on kind of more, rather than specific properties, focused on more community, kind of holistic, proactive partnership building, capacity building, innovative projects and approaches. Hazard mitigation, to both develop hazard mitigation plans as well as to implement recommendations within those plans. And then NRCS, or the Natural Resources Conservation Service, has their Emergency Watershed Protection Program. I mean, as the name suggests, this is something where, you know, if you had a road, a critical road kind of falling into a stream, or, you know, some other kind of immediate stream or watershed issue that was posing an imminent threat to people and property, this could be a good fit for your community. And then just wanted to do a quick plug to the Great Lakes Sediment and Nutrient Reduction Program grant. This is an annual grant program offered through the Great Lakes Commission with GLRI, or Great Lakes federal funding. It's currently open. Applications due at the end of April here on the 22nd. I know Erie County has been the recipient of a couple of these. I think we've had some out in the Genesee Basin as well, and in other locations. And so, you know, this is a project, this is a grant program that would support, you know, really erosion. Again, as the name suggests, it's aptly named. You know, stream bank stabilization, shoreline stabilization, agricultural best management practices, and projects like that that really align with the Great Lakes Action Plan's Focus Area 3 to address non-point sources. Drink here.
Mark, are you planning on applying to that this year? I think you're muted, Mark.
Sorry about that. So we actually just closed out one for Buffalo Creek. We applied last year and we received one. We're going to be working in 18 Mile Creek, so I have an active contract and we started design process. And I'm actually reviewing, it looks like one might be coming together to apply for another one in Cayuga Creek. But essentially, the way that the Great Lakes program, a grant, started out to be just, it used to be just erosion and sediment control. So it was very good and easy to address stream bank erosion issues. Since they added the nutrient aspect of it, or, you know, normally phosphorus is adhered to soil particles. So, you know, by preserving and protecting erosion issues, you're mitigating phosphorus as well, but they're looking for more value added stuff. So what we've done is, you know, we might say we've got 4 or 5 stream bank sites that we want to address, but we're also going to do riparian buffers. We're also going to do farm, you know, we can usually find a farm in the watershed or 2 that needs to do nutrient management planning, which we can do in-house. And then we usually try to add on cover crops kind of bundle it all into a single package to, now we're going to do, 2,000 feet of stream bank stabilization, 1,000 feet of riparian buffers, 400 acres of cover crops, and 400 acres of nutrient management planning to do a whole grant. And that seems to have been going over well over the last couple report periods. So you got to do more. It's a little bit more, and you got to add that nutrient aspect to it that they're looking at.
That's great. So, Joanna, that's all I had prepared. I'm happy to take any questions. I can send this out. We're trying to kind of develop this as a resource, and so that's, I've included links throughout it so that, folks can kind of take their own time and go through everything. Of course, you're always welcome after this presentation or at a later date before the CFA is open to really reach out to me or Ryan Elliott, who is also on this webinar and is with our program.
Yep, so happy to help if anyone needs to reach out.
So one other thing, just to touch base, all these are administered through the Grants Gateway, correct? And the CFA application?
For the CFA grant, for the grants that are part of the CFA, that all goes through the Grants Gateway. And you do have to be pre-registered and pre-approved. So if you don't yet have a profile, that would be something that you could start right now before it's announced.
And then the other thing is making sure that when you submit through the CFA, our Regional Economic Development Council has ranking points, and it's very difficult to rank well across the state if you're not getting full points from the Economic Development Council. So it's important to manage that ahead of the time or during the application process to make sure that you're trying to get as many points as you can locally for the application.
That's a great segue, Mark, because I was going to mention that currently the Western New York Regional Economic Development Council has you can submit a letter of interest. So if you have a potential project in mind, they are looking to kind of hear about that project ahead of time before the CFA comes out and potentially open a discussion with you. And I would definitely recommend that you do that. So if you're thinking about something and maybe you haven't completely scoped it out, obviously the CFA is not even out yet, but a lot of the grant programs are similar. So if you have a project in mind, I definitely suggest that you visit their website and submit a letter of interest to them to start that discussion.